They say you never truly know someone until you see what they do when they think no one is watching. For 3 years, I'd been watching my daughter Erica transform into someone I no longer recognized, all while pretending not to notice. But on that cold January morning in downtown Chicago, with fluorescent lights flickering overhead and strangers shuffling around us in the marble-floored lobby of First National, I finally admitted what I'd known deep down all along. My own child was trying to erase me. "It's just routine paperwork, Mom," Erica had insisted that morning, her voice sweet as honey over the phone. Daniel's lawyer drew it up. Just a simple amendment to protect your assets. Protection. That word had been wielded like a weapon for months. Protection from what? From myself? Apparently, a widow approaching her 50s who'd managed just fine since Richard's heart gave out 3 years ago. A woman who'd raised a child alone, worked double shifts at Mercy Hospital's cafeteria, and somehow scraped together enough to help put that same daughter through college. Now I sat at the glossy mahogany table in the bank's private consultation room, my weathered hands folded over a wee stack of documents bearing a title I couldn't miss: Last Will and Testament, Power of Attorney Amendment. "Just sign, Mom. No one needs to know." Erica's perfectly manicured nail tapped the signature line, her diamond wedding ring catching the light. The ring Richard and I had helped pay for, back when I still believed in my daughter's love. I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to find traces of the little girl who once climbed into my lap during thunderstorms. Her blonde hair was expertly highlighted now, her clothes tailored and expensive. When had the gap between us grown so wide? When had money become more important than memory? Daniel sat to my right, his cologne too strong for the small room. His smile never reached his eyes as he slid the fancy pen toward me. A pen that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. "Maggie," he said, using that condescending tone he reserved just for me, "think about Jacob. Don't you want your grandson to have security? This protects everyone. Jacob, my sweet 9-year-old grandson, the only pure thing left in this toxic equation." Last week, he'd called me crying because his mother told him they might lose their house if Grandma doesn't help us. I later discovered their mortgage was fine. They just wanted a vacation home in Florida. Under the table, Daniel's hand found my arm. His fingers dug in. Not enough to leave marks, but enough that I felt each manicured nail pressing through my cardigan. A silent threat. "The bank manager is waiting, Mom," Erica whispered, glancing nervously at the glass door where Mrs. Vaughn, a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked dark hair, was reviewing something at her desk. "Just sign so we can all move on with our day." Move on. That's what they wanted. To move on with my money. The final $40,000 Richard had left me. The last piece of him I had to hold on to. Money meant for my security in old age, not for their vacation home or Daniel's ridiculous sports car dreams. This wasn't the first time. It had started small. Loans that were never repaid, guilt trips about Jacob's private school tuition, constant reminders that I owed them for checking in on me after Richard died. Each time I'd given in, watching my savings dwindle, telling myself it was what family did. But this, taking legal control of everything I had left, this was different. I stared at the document, my vision blurring. The paragraphs seemed to swim together, legal jargon designed to confuse. But I understood enough. This would give them power over every decision, every penny. I would become invisible, alive but irrelevant. "I'm not sure about this," I said, my voice barely audible. "Maybe I should have my own lawyer look at it first." Daniel's fingers dug deeper. "Mom?" Erica snapped, her perfect smile faltering. "We've discussed this. It's a waste of money to hire some lawyer when Daniel's already had this reviewed. Don't you trust us?" Trust. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. I thought about the night before, when I'd sat alone in my modest South Side apartment, looking through old photo albums, pictures of Erica's graduation, where Richard and I had beamed, with pride. Her wedding day, when I'd spent weeks sewing beads onto her veil by hand because we couldn't afford the one she'd wanted from the boutique. Christmases, birthdays, ordinary Sundays, a lifetime of giving everything I had. And now they wanted the last piece of me. Outside our glass enclosure, the bank hummed with activity. Tellers counted cash, customers waited in line, security cameras blinked their red eyes. So many witnesses, yet I'd never felt more alone. "We don't have all day," Daniel said, checking his expensive watch. "Some of us have real jobs to get back to." The dig wasn't subtle. My part-time hospital cafeteria position wasn't a real job to them. despite the fact that it had helped put food on our table when Richard was between jobs, had helped fund Erica's first car, her prom dress, her wedding. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, foreign. My hand trembled, not from age, but from something deeper. Fear, anger, grief for what my family had become. Daniel's grip tightened again. Be smart. Don't make a scene. That's when something shifted inside me. Don't make a scene. How many times had I heard those words throughout my life? Don't make a scene when the landlord overcharged us. Don't make a scene when Richard's insurance tried to deny his claim. Don't make a scene when Erica borrowed money from my purse as a teenager. Always, I'd stayed quiet. Reasonable, invisible. Mrs. Vaughn glanced our way through the glass, her eyes sharp and assessing. She'd been watching us more carefully than I realized. Something in her gaze, professional. Concern, perhaps, gave me courage I didn't know I had. My hand moved, not to sign my name, but to scrawl something else entirely on the margin of the document. 4 words in shaky blue ink. Help. Forced to sign. Then, with my heart hammering in my chest, I did something unprecedented in 50 years of being the family peacekeeper. I caught Mrs. Vaughn's eye and deliberately pushed the document toward the glass wall where she could see it. For one breathless moment, the world seemed to pause. Mrs. Vaughn's eyes widened as she read my desperate plea. Her jaw tightened, and without hesitation, her hand moved beneath her desk. I knew in that instant that everything was about to change. The invisible cage they'd built around me was about to shatter, and for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected bloom in my chest. Hope. The bank fell silent in waves, like a theater after the lights come on. First, the tellers stopped talking. Then the customers in line turned to stare. And finally, the security guards moved with quiet purpose toward our glass room. Mrs. Vaughn entered first, her posture ramrod straight, her voice controlled but firm. Mrs. Reynolds, I need to speak. With you privately for a moment. Daniel's fingers finally released my arm, leaving behind phantom pain where his nails had dug in. His smile remained, but panic flashed in his eyes. We're almost done here, he said smoothly. Just finishing up some family business. Family business that requires physical coercion? Mrs. Vaughn's gaze flicked to my arm, then back to Daniel's face. She didn't wait for his answer. Mrs. Reynolds, would you please come with me? Erica's perfect mask cracked. Mom, what did you do? She hissed, low enough that only I could hear. You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing them. Not hurting them, not betraying them, embarrassing them. Even now, appearance mattered most. I stood on shaky legs, gathering my purse. I'll be right back, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Mom, sit down, Erica demanded, her cheeks flushing. This is ridiculous. Tell her you're fine. But I was already moving, following Mrs. Vaughn out of the glass room. Behind us, I heard Daniel's chair scrape back as he stood. This is completely unnecessary, he called after us. Mrs. Vaughn, you're misunderstanding the situation. The security guards positioned themselves between us, blocking Daniel from following. One of them, a tall man with kind eyes, nodded at me reassuringly. Mrs. Vaughn led me to her office, closing the door behind us. The room was warm, with certificates on the walls and a small plant on the windowsill. Please sit down, Mrs. Reynolds. Her voice had softened. Can I get you some water? The simple kindness nearly broke me. Nodded, unable to speak, as she poured water from a pitcher and handed me the glass. I saw what you wrote, she said carefully. Are you being forced to sign those documents against your will? The question hung in the air between us. This was my moment. I could still back down, laugh it off as a misunderstanding, return to the glass room and sign away my life. It would be easier, wouldn't it? No. Conflict. No scene. I took a sip of water, then set the glass down with a small clink. Yes, I said finally. My daughter and son-in-law want control of my finances. They've been taking from me for years, but this... I gestured vaguely toward the consultation room. This would give them everything. The last of what my husband left me. Mrs. Vaughn nodded, her expression professional, but compassionate. Have they threatened you in any way? I hesitated, then rolled up my cardigan sleeve. Already small red marks were forming where Daniel's fingers had pressed. Not with words. She took a deep breath. Mrs. Reynolds, what you're describing is financial coercion, possibly elder abuse. It's not just wrong. It's illegal. Elder abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. I was only 50, hardly elderly in my own mind, but the law saw it differently. I don't want to get them in trouble, I said automatically, the peacekeeper in me still trying to protect them. I just don't want to sign. And you won't have to. Mrs. Vaughn leaned forward slightly. But I need to be clear. What's happening is serious. I've triggered our security protocol, and we have an obligation to document this. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? Outside the office, I could hear raised voices. Daniel's smooth, professional tone had vanished, replaced by something angrier, louder. Erica was crying. Those perfect tears she'd mastered as a teenager when she didn't get her way. They're using my grandson, I whispered, telling him they'll lose their house if I don't help, using him to pressure me. Something hardened in Mrs. Vaughn's eyes. She had children too, perhaps, or grandchildren. That's manipulation of a minor, she said quietly. Another serious concern. A knock came at the door, and the kind-eyed security guard poked his head in. Police are here, Mrs. Vaughn. Standard protocol for the alarm. My heart lurched. Police? Just a formality, Mrs. Vaughn assured me. When I triggered the alarm, it automatically notified them. They'll want to take statements. She hesitated, then added gently, This is your chance to stop this, Mrs. Reynolds, before they take everything. Everything. Not just money, but dignity, independence, self-respect. The last pieces of Richard that I had clung to. I thought about Jacob, about the example I was setting. Would I teach him that it was okay to be bullied, even by family? That money mattered more than respect? That his grandmother was someone who could be pushed around, intimidated, erased? I'll talk to them, I said finally. I'll tell them everything. In the lobby, the scene had escalated. Daniel stood toe-to-toe with a police officer, his lawyer's instincts in full force. This is a misunderstanding, he was saying. A family disagreement at most. Erica spotted me emerging from Mrs. Vaughn's office. Mom, she called, her voice breaking perfectly. Tell them this is a mistake. All eyes turned to me. Customers, tellers, guards, officers. For a moment, I felt that old urge to smooth things over, to make peace at any cost. But then I saw something that broke the spell. Jacob, my grandson, stood near the entrance, holding his tablet, looking confused and frightened. Daniel must have called their nanny to bring him, thinking the sight of him would make me cave. Our eyes met across the lobby, and in his, I saw not manipulation, but genuine concern. He didn't understand what was happening, only that people were upset, that his parents were angry, that his grandmother looked afraid. In that moment, I found my voice. My name is Margaret Reynolds, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And I'm being coerced into signing over my assets to my daughter and son-in-law. They've been taking from me for years, using my grandson to manipulate me. Today, my son-in-law physically intimidated me while trying to force me to sign documents I don't understand or want. The silence was deafening. That's not true, Daniel sputtered. Maggie's confused. She's been struggling since her husband died. I'm not confused, I interrupted, my voice stronger now. And I'm not signing anything. Not today, not ever. One of the police officers, a woman with steely eyes, stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Baker, I'm going to need you to step aside and speak with my colleague. Mrs. Reynolds, if you'd come with me, we'd like to take your statement. As I walked across that lobby, past the staring faces and whispered conversations, past my daughter's look of betrayal and Daniel's barely contained rage, I felt something shift inside me. The invisible cage wasn't just broken. It was gone. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of official statements, sympathetic glances, and sleepless nights. I sat in my small apartment on the south side, watching headlights sweep across my living room ceiling, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The police had been kind, but thorough. Officer Rivera, the woman with steely eyes, had documented everything. The marks on my arm, the note I'd written, the threatening behaviors that had escalated over months. She'd used phrases like pattern of coercion and financial exploitation while typing on her department laptop. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Reynolds, she'd told me before leaving. We see cases like yours more often than you'd think. People you're supposed to be able to trust, using that trust against you. Now, as Friday evening settled over Chicago, I found myself jumping at every sound. The neighbor's door closing, a car backfiring on the street, the radiator's familiar ping as it heated my modest 2-bedroom apartment. I'd changed the locks that afternoon, something Officer Rivera had strongly suggested. The locksmith, a burly man with gentle hands, had given me a discount when I'd explained the situation in halting, embarrassed fragments. My daughter, I'd started, then stopped, unable to finish. Say no more, he'd said quietly, installing a deadbolt that even Daniel's expensive tools couldn't breach. My mother went through something similar with my brother. Family can be the worst criminals because they know exactly where to aim. Where to aim? The phrase echoed as I made myself tea, my hands still unsteady. Erica had always known exactly where to aim. My guilt over being a single working mother during her childhood, my grief over Richard, my adoration of Jacob. Perfect ammunition, delivered with surgical precision. My phone had been ringing nonstop since yesterday. Erica. Daniel. Numbers. I didn't recognize that I suspected were their friends or possibly lawyers. I'd turned it off after the 20th call, the silence both terrifying and liberating. The only call I'd answered was from Mrs. Vaughn, who'd phoned to check on me and to give me information about a senior services legal clinic that could help me secure my accounts. They specialize in cases like yours, she'd explained. The consultation is free. Cases like mine. Elder abuse. Financial exploitation. The terms still made me flinch. They were for helpless, confused old people. Not for me. A hospital worker who could still pull double shifts when needed, who remembered every regular customer's coffee order, who'd raised a child alone after being widowed too young. But then I'd look down at my arm, where Daniel's fingerprints had faded to yellow-green shadows, and I'd remember the truth. I wasn't immune just because I wasn't 80. I wasn't safe just because they were family. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. 3 sharp raps, then silence. I froze, teacup halfway to my lips. "Grandma? Are you there?" Jacob's voice, small and uncertain, filtered through the wood. My heart stuttered. I set down my cup and moved to the door, peering through the peephole. Jacob stood alone in the hallway, his backpack hanging off one shoulder, his, tablet clutched to his chest like armor. "Jacob?" I called through the door. "Where are your parents?" "Mom and Dad are in the car," he replied, shifting from foot to foot. "They said to tell you they'll wait, but they're not coming up because you just call the police again." Of course they'd send Jacob, their most effective weapon. I hesitated, my hand on the new deadbolt. "They said to give you this," he continued, holding up an envelope, "and to tell you they're sorry about the bank. Dad says it was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. 3 years of escalating demands reduced to a convenient miscommunication. I took a deep breath and opened the door, but only with the chain still latched. Another of Officer Rivera's suggestions. Jacob's face lit up when he saw me through the narrow gap. "Grandma, you're okay?" "I'm okay," I confirmed, managing a smile. "Did they tell you what happened?" He shuffled uncomfortably. "Mom said you got confused at the bank and caused a big scene. Dad said you accused them of stuff they didn't do." He looked down at his sneakers. "But Ms. Patty at school says there's always more than one side to a story." Ms. Patty sounded wise. "That's true," I said carefully. "There is another side." Jacob nodded, then thrust the envelope toward the gap. "Here. They said it's important." I took it, noting the expensive stationery, Daniel's law firm letterhead. "Thank you." Jacob glanced over his shoulder toward the elevators, then leaned closer to the gap. "Grandma," he whispered, "are you mad at me too?" The question broke my heart. "Oh, Jacob, no. Never at you." I wished I could open the door fully, pull him into a hug. "None of this is your fault. But I said that thing about us losing our house," he admitted, his voice small. "Dad told me to say it on the phone. He said it would help convince you." I swallowed hard. "I know you were just doing what they told you. They're not really going to lose the house, are they?" His eyes, so like Erica's before life had hardened her, were wide with worry. "No, honey. The house is fine." I hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to come in for a minute? I made cookies yesterday." I immediately regretted the offer. What if this was their plan? To use Jacob to get inside to pressure me again, or worse? But Jacob was already shaking his head. "I can't. Dad's timing me. He said 5 minutes max. Or they're coming up. A test then. To see if I'd really call the police again if they showed up." I felt a flare of anger that they were involving Jacob in these mind games. "I understand," I said. "But Jacob, I want you to know something important. You can always call me or come see me, no matter what. You aren't part of this problem between your parents and me." He nodded solemnly. "I know. That's what Grandpa always used to say about grown-up problems. Richard. Even now, his wisdom lived on through our grandson." I blinked back sudden tears. "Jacob," Daniel's voice echoed from the stairwell. Time's up. Jacob's shoulders tensed. I gotta go. He started to turn, then spun back quickly. Oh, I almost forgot. He pulled something from his backpack, a folded piece of construction paper. I made this in art class. It's for you. He passed it through the gap, then took off running toward his father's voice without waiting for a response. I closed the door and leaned against it, clutching both the ominous envelope and the folded artwork to my chest. Only when I heard the stairwell door slam shut did I allow myself to slide down to the floor, my legs suddenly unable to support me. With trembling fingers, I unfolded Jacob's drawing. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall one labeled Dad, a medium one with yellow hair labeled Mom, and a smaller one labeled Me. They stood next to a house with a chimney and flowers. Off to the side, separated by what looked like a blue river or perhaps a road, stood another figure, gray-haired, wearing a smile and a purple dress. Next to it, in careful 9-year-old printing, Grandma, separate, apart from their perfect family unit. Is that how Jacob had been taught to see me? As someone who existed on the other side of some uncrossable divide? Or was it his innocent observation of a growing truth, that his parents had been pushing me away long before the bank incident? I carefully set the drawing aside and opened Daniel's envelope, bracing myself for legal threats or more manipulative guilt trips. Instead, I found a single page with just 3 sentences. We're willing to overlook yesterday's unfortunate incident if you are. Jacob misses you. Call us when you're thinking clearly again. The condescension dripped from every word. Unfortunate incident. Thinking clearly. As if I were the irrational one, the problem to be managed. I crumpled the note, then smoothed it out again, remembering Officer Rivera's advice to document everything. This too was evidence of their continuing attempt to gaslight me, to rewrite reality, to use Jacob as leverage. Rising slowly from the floor, I placed both the note and Jacob's drawing on my kitchen table. Then I plugged in my phone and turned it back on. 27 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 39 text messages. I bypassed them all and dialed the number Mrs. Vaughn had given me for the senior legal clinic. It was time to protect not just my savings, but my future. And perhaps, in some way I couldn't yet see, Jacob's future too. As the phone rang, I touched my grandson's drawing, tracing the blue divide he'd illustrated between us. Some rivers could be crossed. Some roads had bridges. I just had to find mine. Monday morning arrived with a brittle coldness that seemed to crystallize the air itself. I bundled up in my warmest coat, a Christmas gift from Richard our last year together, and caught the 7:15 bus downtown for my appointment at the Weber Senior Legal Clinic. The weekend had brought no peace. Erica had escalated from calls to a full appearance outside my building Sunday afternoon, standing on the sidewalk shouting up at my window until Mrs. Kravitz from 2B threatened to call the police. I'd watched from behind my curtains as my daughter, my own flesh and blood, had spat curses at an elderly woman who was simply trying to protect her neighbor. "You don't know what she did," Erica had screamed, her perfect hair disheveled in the winter wind. She betrayed her own family? Betrayal. The word had lodged in my chest like a splinter. Was protecting myself truly a betrayal? Or had the real betrayal happened years earlier, when they'd begun to see me as a resource rather than a person? Now, as I climbed the stairs to the clinic's 3rd-floor office, those questions still circled in my mind. The reception area was warm and surprisingly cheerful. Plants in the windows, comfortable chairs, a coffee station in the corner. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes, took my information and offered me tea while I waited. "Mr. Levinson will be with you shortly," he said, handing me a clipboard with intake forms. "Take your time with these." The forms asked about my finances, my family situation, instances of coercion or abuse. I filled them out methodically, trying to maintain clinical detachment as I documented 3 years of escalating financial demands, emotional manipulation, and finally, physical intimidation. When I reached the section titled Assets at Risk, I paused. What exactly did I have left? The apartment was rented. My car was 12 years old. My savings, what remained after years of helping Erica and Daniel, amounted to just under $42,000. Not a fortune by any measure, but everything to me. My safety net, my future, the last tangible proof of Richard's careful planning for me. "Mrs. Reynolds?" A tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses appeared in the doorway. "I'm Aaron Levinson. Please, come on back." His office was unpretentious but orderly, with degrees on the wall and case files neatly stacked on a side table. He gestured for me to take a seat, then settled behind his desk, reviewing my intake forms with a frown that deepened as he read. "First," he said, looking up, "I want to commend your courage. What you did at the bank, stopping the transaction, seeking help, that took tremendous strength." I shook my head slightly. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like desperation. "Sometimes they're the same thing." He tapped my forms. "Based on what you've shared here and what was forwarded from Mrs. Vaughn at First National, we're looking at a clear pattern of financial exploitation and coercion. The incident at the bank gives us something concrete to work with." "Work with for what?" I asked. "I'm not looking to press charges or anything. I just want to protect what I have left." Mr. Levinson leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Reynolds, I understand your reluctance. These are your family members. But what they've attempted is not just morally wrong, it's criminal. At minimum, we need to secure your finances and establish legal boundaries." Legal boundaries? The concept was almost laughable. Erica had never respected any boundaries, legal or otherwise. "What exactly do you recommend?" I asked. For the next hour, Mr. Levinson outlined a protection plan, securing new accounts at a different bank, filing for a restraining order based on Daniel's physical intimidation, documenting all contact attempts, and considering power of attorney options that would designate someone trustworthy, not family, to make decisions if I ever became incapacitated. "The restraining order seems extreme," I said hesitantly. "What about Jacob? I don't want to lose contact with my grandson." "We can request specific provisions for supervised visits with Jacob," he assured me. "But Mrs. Reynolds, I need you to understand something." His voice grew gentle but firm. "People who've gone as far as your daughter and son-in-law rarely stop on their own. The restraining order isn't just about physical protection, it's about creating clear legal consequences if they continue to harass you." As I absorbed his words, a knock came at the door. The receptionist entered with a manila envelope. "This just came by courier from Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "They insisted it be delivered immediately." Mr. Levinson frowned, taking the envelope. "Were you expecting anything?" "No," I said, anxiety fluttering in my stomach. He checked the sender information, and his frown deepened. "It's from Harrington, Beck and Associates. That's a prestigious law firm downtown." He handed me the envelope. "Would you like privacy to review this?" My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a formal letter on expensive letterhead, along with several attached documents. The letter was addressed to me, but copied to Erica and Daniel Baker. "Dear Mrs. Reynolds," I read aloud, my voice barely steady. "This letter serves as formal notice of legal action being pursued against you by Erica and Daniel Baker for defamation, false accusations resulting in professional harm, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Our clients assert that your unfounded claims at First National Bank on January 15th have caused severe damage to Mr. Baker's professional reputation as an attorney and have resulted in significant emotional suffering." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I handed the letter to Mr. Levinson, unable to continue. He scanned it quickly, his expression darkening. "This is a scare tactic," he said firmly. "A baseless threat designed to intimidate you into dropping the whole matter." "They're suing me," I whispered, the reality sinking in. "My own daughter is suing me." "They're threatening to sue you," Mr. Levinson corrected. "There's a significant difference. And given the evidence we have, the bank security footage, the marks on your arm, the documented history of financial demands, they don't have a case. In fact," he added, setting the letter down with controlled anger, "this letter itself could be considered witness intimidation." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. "You let me respond to this," he said decisively, "and we proceed exactly as planned, but with even more urgency. This letter tells me they're desperate and escalating." Desperate. Escalating. The words echoed in my mind as Mr. Levinson outlined next steps. Would they ever stop? Or would this battle consume whatever years I had left? As if reading my thoughts, he added gently, "Mrs. Reynolds, Maggie, this will get worse before it gets better. But it will get better. I've seen hundreds of cases like yours, and there's always a turning point where the manipulators realize their tactics aren't working anymore. We just need to hold steady until then. Hold steady." I thought of Richard, of how he'd faced his heart condition, afraid but resolute, determined to prepare me for a future without him. He'd never imagined this particular future, where the daughter we'd raised together would become my greatest threat. But perhaps he'd given me more strength than either of us had realized. Perhaps that strength had always been there, dormant until that moment in the bank when something finally broke. Not me, but the chains of obligation and guilt that had bound me for so long. Okay, I said, straightening in my chair. Let's proceed. All of it. The new accounts, the restraining order, everything. I want my life back. Mr. Levinson nodded, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Then let's get started. The paper trail they've created thinking they could intimidate you, we're about to turn it into their biggest mistake. February arrived with a vengeance, bringing the kind of bitter cold that seemed to seep through Chicago's concrete and steel directly into one's bones. I'd spent the past 2 weeks rebuilding my life from the foundation up. New bank accounts at a credit union Mrs. Vaughn had recommended, a temporary restraining order against Daniel, and by extension, Erica, and regular sessions with a support group for victims of family financial abuse. The phrase still made me wince. Victims. Abuse. Words I'd associated with bruises and broken bones. Not with a daughter asking for loans or a son-in-law digging his fingers into my arm under a table. But the support group was teaching me otherwise. Every Tuesday evening in the basement of St. Mary's Community Center, I sat in a circle with 8 other people, mostly women, mostly older than me, and listened to stories that echoed my own with eerie similarity. They always say it's just temporary, said Martha, a retired teacher whose son had drained her pension. Just until they get back on their feet. They make you feel like the crazy one, added Gerald, whose nephew had stolen his identity. Like you're selfish for wanting to keep what's yours. Each story strengthened me, like individual threads weaving together into a rope strong enough to pull me from the pit of guilt and confusion. I wasn't alone. I wasn't overreacting. And most importantly, I wasn't wrong for protecting myself. But Jacob. God, I missed Jacob. The restraining order didn't technically prevent me from seeing him. Mr. Levinson had made sure of that. But Erica had other ideas. My calls went unanswered. My attempts to arrange the court-approved supervised visits were met with silence or excuses. It's temporary, Mr. Levinson assured me during our follow-up meeting. Once the legal proceedings stabilize, we'll have more leverage to enforce the visitation schedule. Legal proceedings. Another phrase that made my stomach churn. Despite Mr. Levinson's confidence that their lawsuit was baseless, Erica and Daniel were pressing forward with their defamation claim. Their lawyer, a college friend of Daniel's with a reputation for aggressive tactics, had filed motions to dismiss our restraining order and was demanding my financial records going back 5 years. They're fishing, Mr. Levinson explained, looking for anything they can use to paint you as unstable or financially irresponsible. Standard intimidation tactics. Standard or not, they worked. Each day brought a new knot of anxiety, a new sleepless night, a new moment of doubt. Had I overreacted at the bank? Should I have just signed the papers, kept the peace? The old Maggie, the peacekeeper, the giver, whispered these doubts constantly. But the new Maggie, the one being born through fire, knew better. That new Maggie was making other changes too. Small ones, perhaps insignificant to anyone else, but revolutionary to me. I'd started taking walks along the lake every morning, regardless of the temperature. I'd joined a community art class on Thursday evenings, something I'd always wanted to try but had never found the time for. And I'd reconnected with old friends from before Richard's death, people who remembered me as something other than just Erica's mother or Jacob's grandmother. One such friend was Carol Jensen, who'd worked with me at Mercy Hospital years ago. We met for coffee at a small shop near my apartment, the windows frosted with ice crystals that transformed the gray city into something magical. I've been meaning to call you for ages, Carol said, warming her hands around her mug. But you know how it goes. Kids, grandkids, life. I nodded, understanding completely. Once, that would have been my excuse too. When I heard what happened, she reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Maggie, I'm so sorry, and so proud of you for standing up. For yourself. I blinked in surprise. How did you hear? Small world. My niece works at First National. Not at your branch, but word traveled. Bank employees aren't supposed to gossip, but... She shrugged. That kind of drama travels. My cheeks burned. Great. So the whole city knows. Hey. Carol squeezed my hand. Nobody's judging you. If anything, people are amazed by your courage. Do you know how many people would have just signed those papers? How many do every single day? I hadn't thought of it that way. In my mind, I'd been the one causing a scene, creating drama. But from another perspective, Carol's perspective, I'd been standing up for myself in a situation where many would have crumbled. There's something else, Carol said, lowering her voice slightly. I ran into Patty Donovan last week, you remember her? She works at Jacob's school now, front office. My heart quickened. And she mentioned Jacob's been asking about you. Apparently, he tried to call you from the school phone during lunch period. The call didn't go through, wrong number maybe, but Patty said he was pretty upset. Tears pricked my eyes. Erica's probably changed my contact information in his, phone. She's always had access to his devices. Carol nodded grimly. Patty thought something was off. She said Jacob's been quieter lately, drawing alone during recess. When she asked if everything was okay at home, he just shrugged and said, Mom and Dad fight a lot now, about Grandma and money. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been finding my strength, rebuilding my life, Jacob was caught in the crossfire, confused, possibly scared, definitely missing me as much as I missed him. I need to see him, I said, my voice barely steady. I have court-approved visitation rights, but Erica keeps finding excuses. Carol considered this, tapping her nail against her mug. Patty mentioned the winter science fair is next Friday evening. All families are invited. Grandparents? Too. It's a public event on school grounds. Erica and Daniel would still be there, I pointed out. The restraining order applies to them approaching you, not to you both being in a public place with other people around, Carol finished. At least that's how my daughter's order worked when she left her ex. As long as you maintain distance and don't engage, you should be fine. And you'd get to see Jacob. The possibility bloomed like hope in my chest. To see Jacob, to let him know I was okay, that I still loved him, that none of this was his fault. It would be worth navigating the tension, worth risking Erica's anger. I'll talk to Mr. Levinson first, I decided. Make sure I'm not violating anything. But if he says it's okay, I squeezed Carol's hand back. Thank you. That's what friends are for. She smiled, then hesitated. Just be prepared, Maggie. Erica won't make this easy. I know. And I did. My daughter, who'd once brought me hand-picked dandelions and homemade Mother's Day cards, now saw me as the enemy, an obstacle between her and what she wanted. It was a loss I was only beginning to grieve properly. But Jacob is worth it, I added softly. And honestly, so am I. The words surprised me as they left my mouth. So am I. Worth it. Worth the fight, the discomfort, the shattered peace. Worth standing up for, even when it hurt, even when it meant being called selfish or difficult or confused. Carol's eyes crinkled with approval. There she is, the Maggie I remember. The one who worked double shifts with bronchitis because her daughter needed braces. The one who organized that fundraiser when Bill from radiology lost his house in the fire. I'd forgotten that person, I admitted. She was never gone, Carol said. Just buried under everyone else's needs for a while. It's nice to see her coming back. As we finished our coffee, making plans to meet again the following week, I felt something shifting, like tectonic plates realigning deep beneath the surface of my life. The foundation wasn't just being rebuilt. It was being reinforced, strengthened, prepared for whatever storms might still come. Because I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that Erica and Daniel weren't finished. The science fair would be just the beginning. The real battle, for my dignity, for Jacob's well-being, perhaps even for justice itself, was still ahead. But for the first time in years, I wasn't facing it alone. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't facing it afraid. The Thomas Jefferson Elementary School gymnasium buzzed with the controlled chaos only elementary school events can generate. Science fair projects lined the perimeter on folding tables, everything from baking soda volcanoes to complex solar system models. Children darted between displays, parents chatted in clusters, and teachers circulated with clipboards, evaluating each project. I stood just inside the entrance, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mr. Levinson had confirmed I was within my rights to attend. The restraining order specified Daniel couldn't come within 50 feet of me, but a public event with proper distance maintained would not violate those terms. Still, scanning the crowded room for either my grandson or my daughter sent adrenaline coursing through me. Mrs. Reynolds? I turned to find a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a teacher's sensible cardigan approaching me. I'm Patricia Donovan, Patty. Jacob's in my 4th grade class. Carol's friend, I said, recognizing the name. Thank you for looking out for him. She nodded discreetly. He's in the far corner by the water fountain. Planet project with a working model of the moon's orbit. He's been asking if his grandmother would come. My eyes filled with tears. Has he? Are Are they here yet? My daughter and her husband? Mr. Baker is by the judge's table talking with the principal. Her expression remained neutral, professional. Mrs. Baker was helping set up Jacob's display earlier, but I haven't seen her in about 15 minutes. I took a steadying breath. Thank you, I'll keep my distance from Mr. Baker. Patty touched my arm lightly. Jacob could use a friendly face right now. He's been very withdrawn lately. The crowd parted momentarily, and there he was, my grandson, standing proudly beside a detailed model of the Earth-Moon system, complete with a small motor that rotated the moon around a blue and green painted Earth. His dark hair was neatly combed, his shirt buttoned all the way to the collar. Erica's doing, no doubt. But his sneakers were untied, and he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Pure Jacob. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. When he glanced up and saw me, his face transformed. Surprise, then joy, then an almost painful relief. Grandma, he whispered, looking quickly over his shoulder before running to me. You came? I knelt to his level, drinking in the sight of him. Of course I came. I wouldn't miss your science project for anything. He threw his arms around my neck, and I held him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo and that indefinable essence that was just Jacob. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. Mom said you were sick and couldn't have visitors, he said quietly. But you don't look sick. The lie didn't surprise me, but it still stung. I'm not sick, sweetheart. There's been some grown-up disagreements between me and your parents, but none of that has anything to do with you and me. He processed this, his 9-year-old mind more perceptive than most adults gave him credit for. Is that why Dad gets mad when I ask about you? And why Mom cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep? My heart ached. Probably. But listen to me, Jacob. None of this is your fault. Not one bit of it. I know that, he said, with the simple clarity of childhood. Dad says it's because you're confused about money stuff, but I heard them talking. Dad wants your money for a boat. I almost laughed at the directness of it. A boat, of course. Daniel had been talking about a 30-foot cruiser for months, the perfect status symbol for a lawyer on the rise. Well, I said carefully, grown-ups sometimes disagree about important things. But what's most important right now is your amazing project. Tell me how it works? Jacob's face lit up as he led me to his display, explaining how he'd built the motorized system with help from his science teacher. See, the moon orbits Earth every 27.3 days, and I calculated the gear ratio to make it accurate to scale. I listened, asking questions, marveling at his intelligence and enthusiasm. For a few precious minutes, everything else fell away. The legal battles, the restraining orders, the family fractures. It was just a grandmother and grandson sharing a moment of pure connection. Then I felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. I looked up to find Daniel standing across the gym, his expression thunderous despite the fixed smile on his face. Next to him stood the school principal, oblivious to the tension as she chatted animatedly. I turned slightly away, focusing entirely on Jacob. I wouldn't give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing my discomfort. And the judges already came by, Jacob was saying. Mr. Peterson said mine was one of the most accurate lunar orbit models he's seen from a 4th grader. That's wonderful, Jacob. I'm so proud. What are you doing here? Erica's voice, sharp and cold, cut through our conversation. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, designer purse dangling from her elbow. Jacob's smile faltered. Mom, Grandma came to see my project. Isn't that cool? Erica didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on me with barely contained fury. You need to leave. Now. I have every right to be here, I said quietly, straightening to my full height. This is a public school event. There's a restraining order. Against Daniel approaching me, not against me attending. My grandson's science fair. I kept my voice steady, aware of curious glances from nearby parents. I'm not going to cause a scene, Erica. I just wanted to see Jacob. Mom, Jacob tugged at Erica's sleeve. Please don't make Grandma go. She hasn't even seen how the eclipse function works yet. For a moment, something flickered in Erica's eyes. Perhaps remembrance of her own childhood science fairs, where Richard and I had always stood proudly beside her projects. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the hard glint I'd grown accustomed to. 5 minutes, she said tightly. Then you're gone. And if Daniel sees you here, I've already seen her. Daniel appeared behind Erica, his lawyer's smile firmly in place despite the tension radiating from him. Hello, Maggie. Feeling better? Erica? Mentioned you've been unwell. The lie hung between us, both a threat and a challenge. I could call them out, create the very scene they were accusing me of wanting to cause, or I could choose a different path. I looked at Jacob, who watched this exchange with anxious eyes. Other children and parents were beginning to notice the tension, conversations quieting around us. Jacob was just about to show me how his eclipse model works, I said, my voice deliberately light. Weren't you, sweetheart? Jacob nodded eagerly, relief washing over his face. Yeah. See, when you push this button, the moon moves in front of the Earth, blocking the light from this flashlight which represents the sun. Daniel and Erica exchanged glances, clearly frustrated by my refusal to engage in conflict. They couldn't force me to leave without causing exactly the kind of disruption they were accusing me of wanting to create. Just 5 minutes, Erica repeated. We'll be right over there. She pointed to where the refreshments table stood, just close enough to watch but far enough to give the appearance of privacy. As they walked away, Jacob exhaled dramatically. They're so weird lately, he whispered. Always fighting and whispering about court stuff. I know it's tough, I said gently. But you're doing great. Now show me this eclipse function. It looks amazing. For the next 5 minutes, I gave Jacob my complete attention, marveling at his knowledge of lunar mechanics and the care he'd taken with his model. When our time was nearly up, I handed him a small envelope I'd been carrying in my purse. This has my new phone number, I told him, and my email address. If you ever need to reach me for anything at all, these will work. He tucked the envelope carefully into his pocket. Mom took your number out of my phone, he confided. She said it was because you changed it, but I didn't believe her. Smart boy. I smiled sadly. Jacob, I'm working on a way for us to see each other regularly again. It might take a little time, but don't think for a second that I don't want to be with you, okay? He nodded solemnly. I know, Grandma. Dad said you didn't want to be family anymore, but that's a lie too. I can tell. From across the room, Erica made a pointed gesture at her watch. Our time was up. I love you, I said, resisting the urge to hug him again, knowing it would only give Daniel and Erica ammunition. So much. Love you too, he whispered back. Then with the resilience of childhood, he brightened. Maybe I'll win a ribbon. The judges announce winners in 10 minutes. I bet you will, I assured him. Your project is absolutely the best one here. As I turned to leave, navigating between curious onlookers and science displays, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Jacob knew I hadn't abandoned him. He had my contact information, and most importantly, he understood in his 9-year-old way that the adult conflicts swirling around him weren't his fault or his burden to bear. It was a small victory in a war I hadn't asked for, but a victory nonetheless. And as I stepped out into the cold Chicago night, stars sharp as diamond chips in the clear black sky, I realized I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Behind me, through the gymnasium's double doors, I heard a sudden swell of applause and cheering. Jacob's name announced through a crackling PA system, followed by first prize, 4th grade division. I paused, looking back through the glass panel in the door. Jacob stood at the front of the room, accepting a blue ribbon, his face split with the widest grin imaginable. Erica and Daniel flanked him, perfect proud parents for the assembled audience. But Jacob wasn't looking at them. His eyes searched the crowd, found the door, found me. He held up his ribbon, just for a second, in my direction. Our private celebration, across a crowded room filled with strangers. I held up my hand in acknowledgement, heart full to bursting, then turned and walked toward the bus stop, the cold no longer quite so biting. Some victories weren't measured in courtrooms or bank accounts. Some were measured in blue ribbons, secret envelopes, and the unbreakable bond between a grandmother and the grandson who saw through the lies to the truth beneath. Spring arrived in Chicago with characteristic unpredictability, one day bringing gentle sunshine, the next delivering sleet that pummeled against windows like angry fists. My life had settled into a similar pattern of extremes. Quiet, contemplative days at my apartment or the art class I'd grown to love. Tense, anxiety-filled hours in courtrooms and law offices. The lawsuit against me had progressed despite Mr. Levinson's attempts to have it dismissed. Daniel's law firm connections had ensured that. But there was one bright spot in the legal storm. The family court had finally enforced my visitation rights with Jacob. Every other Saturday, from noon until 5, I could see him under the supervision of a court-appointed social worker named Vanessa. Today was our 3rd official visit, and I'd planned something special. Jacob had mentioned his science teacher encouraging him to build on his award-winning project, so I'd arranged for us to visit the Adler Planetarium. Vanessa would drive us both and remain nearby, the court's requirements, but otherwise it would be just Jacob and me among the stars. I waited on my apartment steps, bundled against the April chill, heart lifting when Vanessa's blue sedan pulled up precisely at noon. Jacob bounded out, waving a folder stuffed with papers. "Grandma, I brought all my research notes. Mr. Peterson says I might be able to enter the citywide competition if I expand my model to show more of the solar system." I hugged him, savoring the solid reality of him in my arms. "That's wonderful, Jacob. We'll get all the inspiration you need today." Vanessa smiled from the driver's seat. In her early 30s, with practical clothes and gentle eyes, she'd proven to be not just a court requirement, but an unexpected ally. She treated our situation with professionalism, but also genuine compassion. "We need to be back by 5 sharp, she reminded us. Mrs. Baker was very specific. I nodded, hiding my reaction to the mention of Erica. Our interactions during handoffs remained glacial, her eyes never meeting mine, her words directed solely at Vanessa. Daniel stayed in the car, as required by the restraining order. Sometimes I caught him watching through the windshield, expression unreadable behind expensive sunglasses. The planetarium was everything I'd hoped, grand, inspiring, and filled with interactive exhibits that captured Jacob's imagination. We wandered through displays of meteorites and moon rocks, sat through a show about black holes, and spent a long time at a scale model of the solar system. "See, Grandma, this is what I want to build next," Jacob explained, gesturing at the model planets. "But with accurate orbital mechanics, not just static displays." "It's ambitious," I said, impressed. "But if anyone can figure it out, it's you." His smile faltered slightly. "Dad says it's a waste of time. He wants me to focus more on debate club because that's better for law school." Law school? For a 9-year-old? I bit back my initial response. "What do you want to focus on?" He looked surprised, as if no one had asked him that question before. "Space stuff, and maybe computers. I like coding the motors for my models." "Then that's what matters," I said firmly. "You're 9. Jacob, you have years to decide what you want to be. The important thing now is to explore what you love." His shoulders relaxed visibly. "That's what I told Dad, but he got mad. Said I was being difficult like Grandma." The comment stung, but I forced a smile. "Well, being difficult isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it means standing up for what you believe in." We stopped at the cafe for ice cream before heading to the gift shop, where I let Jacob choose a book on spacecraft engineering. Vanessa kept a respectful distance, occasionally checking her watch. It was nearly 4 when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, not wanting to waste precious minutes with Jacob, but something made me glance at the screen. "Maggie, it's Mrs. Kravitz from 2B. Emergency at your apartment, fire department here. Call me ASAP." My stomach dropped. "Vanessa," I called, showing her the message. "I need to call about this." She nodded, concern furrowing her brow. "Go ahead. We're fine here." I stepped away, dialing with shaking fingers. Mrs. Kravitz answered immediately, her normally brisk voice breathless. "Maggie, thank goodness. They broke in, smashed your door clean off its hinges, said they were looking for financial documents." "Who broke in?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your daughter and that husband of hers. I caught them leaving with boxes and called the police, but they were already driving away. The officers are here now, taking my statement." My knees weakened. I clutched a nearby display for support. Is everything destroyed?" "Hard to say from the hallway, but it looks like a tornado hit. They've got the building manager opening your place for the evidence techs." She paused, then added, "I'm so sorry, Maggie. After everything you've been through." I thanked her, promising to return as soon as possible, then ended the call. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Vanessa approached, Jacob trailing, behind her with his new book. "Everything okay?" "No," I said quietly, leading her a few steps away from Jacob. "My apartment's been broken into. It was Erica and Daniel. A neighbor saw them. I need to get back." Her professional demeanor shifted to alarm. "That's a direct violation of the restraining order, and breaking and entering on top of it." "I know." I glanced at Jacob, who was flipping through his book, oblivious to our whispered conversation. "But what about—" "I'll take you straight there," she said decisively. "This changes things. I need to document this and report to the court immediately." The drive back was a blur. I sat in the passenger seat, alternately reassuring Jacob that everything was fine and fielding calls from Mrs. Kravitz with updates. The police were still There. Crime scene technicians were photographing everything. My neighbor had given them a detailed description of Erica and Daniel, including their vehicle. When we arrived, the scene was worse than I'd imagined. Police cars lined the street. Officers moved in and out of the building. Neighbors clustered on the sidewalk, whispering behind raised hands. "Wait here with Jacob," I told Vanessa, not wanting him to see the destruction. "Actually, Mrs. Reynolds," she said, her voice shifting to a more formal tone, "I need to document this as it directly impacts our visitation arrangement. Jacob can wait in the car with an officer." After arranging for a female officer to stay with Jacob, we entered the building. Mrs. Kravitz intercepted us in the lobby, her normally perfectly coiffed hair disheveled from repeatedly running her hands through it. "They've arrested them," she blurted out. "The police found them at their house with your things. They're in custody right now." The words hit me like physical blows. Arrested, custody, my daughter, in jail. Upstairs, my apartment was unrecognizable. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied onto floors, picture frames smashed, including the one of Richard holding newborn Erica, the glass spiderwebbed across their faces. A uniformed officer took my statement while I surveyed the devastation with numb detachment. "They seem to focus on your office area," he explained, gesturing to the upended desk and scattered papers. "Your neighbor says they left with several boxes and files." Mr. Levinson's careful organization of my financial records. The records that would disprove their claims that I was confused, that I'd agreed to give them my money. "Will they stay in jail?" I asked, voice barely audible. "That's up to the judge at the bail hearing, but breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, property damage, those are serious charges." He hesitated, then added gently, "The detective will want to know if you plan to press charges." Press charges. Against my own child. I sank onto the edge of my overturned sofa, suddenly overwhelmed. This was the moment. The real breaking point. Not the bank, not the lawsuit, but this moment where I had to decide. Would I finally hold them accountable, knowing it might sever what remained of our relationship forever? Vanessa sat beside me, her notebook open, but temporarily forgotten. "Mrs. Reynolds, Maggie, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know something." She glanced toward the door, ensuring we had privacy. "In my professional opinion, what I've observed between you and Jacob shows a healthy, loving relationship. What I'm seeing here today," she gestured to the destruction, "indicates individuals who would stop at nothing to maintain you. Control over you, even at Jacob's expense. Jacob, my grandson, the innocent caught in this toxic web." I straightened my shoulders, sudden clarity cutting through the fog of shock. "I need to call Mr. Levinson," I said. "And yes, I want to press charges. All of them. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop enabling their worst impulses. Even when that someone is your child. Even when it breaks your heart." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. More intimate somehow, with polished wooden benches and morning light filtering through tall windows. I sat in the front row beside Mr. Levinson, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Behind me sat Mrs. Vaughn from the bank, Mrs. Kravitz from my apartment building, and several members of my financial abuse support group who'd come to witness this final chapter. 3 months had passed since the break-in. 3 months of police statements, evidence collection, damaged property inventories, and sleepless nights. 3 months of supervised visits with Jacob, who now knew fragments of the truth, that his parents had made some bad choices and were in serious trouble. Erica and Daniel sat at the defendant's table, unrecognizable from the confident manipulators who had once demanded my signature at the bank. Daniel's expensive suits had been replaced by a court-appropriate but clearly off-the-rack alternative. Erica's perfect blonde highlights had grown out, dark roots visible despite her attempts to appear composed. They didn't look at me, hadn't looked at me directly, since that day at my apartment. Their lawyer, not Daniel's original college friend, but a public defender, shuffled papers nervously. The criminal charges had been serious enough: breaking and entering, destruction of property, violation of a restraining order. But it was the financial elder abuse charges that carried the heaviest potential consequences. The investigation had uncovered far more than I'd realized. Not just the emotional manipulation and the attempt to seize control of my assets, but systematic identity theft going back nearly a year. Credit cards opened in my name, loans I'd never applied for, even a second mortgage on a property I didn't own, somehow processed using my social security number and forged signatures. "All rise," the bailiff called, and we stood as Judge Harriet, Oh. Coleman entered. A severe-looking woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Be seated, she instructed, arranging her robes before addressing the court. This is the sentencing hearing in the case of the state of Illinois versus Erica Baker and Daniel Baker. I barely heard the legal formalities that followed, my mind drifting to the path that had led us here. The turning point that day in the bank seemed a lifetime ago. The moment when I decided that my signature, my autonomy, and my dignity were worth fighting for. The judge's voice brought me back to the present. Having reviewed the plea agreement and the evidence presented, I am prepared to render sentencing. She looked directly at Erica and Daniel, her expression stern but not unkind. The charges against you are serious, made more so by the relationship between you and the victim. Mrs. Reynolds was not a stranger you defrauded, but a mother and grandmother you were bound to protect. Erica's shoulders tensed visibly. Daniel stared straight ahead, his lawyer's mask firmly in place despite everything. Mrs. Baker, Mr. Baker, please rise. They stood, a careful foot of space between them. Another change I'd noticed during the proceedings. Once inseparable conspirators, they now seemed distinctly separate entities, united only by shared legal jeopardy. For the charges of breaking and entering, destruction of private property, violation of a restraining order, identity theft, financial fraud, and elder abuse, the court sentences you each to 18 months in the Illinois Department of Corrections, with the possibility of parole after 9 months. I closed my eyes briefly. Prison. My daughter was going to prison. Additionally, the judge continued, you will be required to make full financial restitution to Mrs. Reynolds in the amount of $58,427, representing funds fraudulently obtained plus damages to her property. You will both complete 250 hours of community service upon release, focusing specifically on services for senior citizens, and you will attend mandatory financial ethics counseling as a condition of your parole. She paused, looking at them over the rims of her glasses. I want to be very clear. You are receiving this sentence not because Mrs. Reynolds is your mother and grandmother to your child, but despite that fact. Your familial relationship made your actions more egregious, not less. Daniel's attorney rose to speak, but Judge Coleman cut him off with a raised hand. I'm not finished, counselor. There is the matter of the minor child, Jacob Baker. My heart clenched. This was the part I'd been dreading most. Given the circumstances and recommendations from family services, this court grants temporary guardianship of Jacob Baker to his maternal grandmother, Margaret Reynolds, during the period of his parents' incarceration. The specifics of this arrangement will be detailed in family court next week. Temporary guardianship. Jacob would live with me while they served their sentences. The very outcome they had feared, me having influence over their son, had come to pass because of their own actions. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it brought no satisfaction, only a hollow ache for what might have been. This court is adjourned. The judge's gavel fell with a sharp crack that seemed to echo the finality of it all. As Erica and Daniel were led away by court officers, my daughter finally turned, her eyes meeting mine for a brief, electric moment. I expected hatred, accusation, the familiar manipulation. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, a flicker of the real Erica, the daughter I'd raised, somewhere beneath the hardened exterior. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but perhaps recognition. Then she was gone, through a side door with her husband, toward whatever journey awaited them on the other side of this reckoning. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine warmed the steps where Mr. Levinson and I paused. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Never doubt that. It doesn't feel like a victory, I admitted. It isn't meant to. He squeezed my shoulder gently. It's justice, not vengeance. And more importantly, it's protection. For you and for Jacob. Jacob. My grandson would be waiting at his school where the principal had agreed to keep him. Until I came to explain the outcome. How do you tell a 9-year-old that his parents are going to prison? That he'll be living with his grandmother for the next year at least? What do I tell him? I asked, voicing my fear aloud. The truth, Mrs. Vaughn said, joining us on the steps. Simplified, gentle, but still the truth. Children understand more than we give them credit for. Mrs. Vaughn had become an unexpected friend through this ordeal, her initial professional concern evolving into genuine care. She'd even helped me secure a small business loan to start a part-time catering service out of my newly repaired apartment, something I'd always dreamed of, but never pursued. He'll be okay, Maggie, she assured me, because he has you. As we parted ways, I walked alone through Millennium Park, taking a moment before facing the challenges ahead. The spring breeze carried the scent of new growth, of possibilities. Around me, tourists snapped photos of Cloudgate, children chased pigeons, couples strolled hand in hand, ordinary moments in ordinary lives. I paused beside the Crown Fountain, watching children splash in the shallow, reflecting pool, their laughter carrying on the breeze. One little boy, about Jacob's age, caught my eye and waved spontaneously. I waved back, smiling despite the weight in my chest. My phone buzzed, a text from Carol, who'd agreed to meet me at Jacob's school for moral support. At Jefferson Elementary, take your time, we're here when you're ready. Ready. Was anyone ever truly ready for the conversation I was about to have? For the responsibility I was about to shoulder? But then I remembered that January morning at the bank, when I'd written those 4 desperate words on the margin of a document. Help, forced to sign. I hadn't been ready then either. Yet somehow I'd found the courage to protect myself, to stand up, to say no. And that single moment of courage had led here. To heartbreak, yes, but also to freedom. To loss, but also to new beginnings. To an ending, but also to a chance to build something healthier, truer, for both myself and Jacob. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and turned toward Jefferson Elementary, toward my grandson, toward whatever came next. Because the truth, painful as it sometimes was, had finally set us free. Not free from consequences or challenges, those would always be part of life, but free from the lies, manipulation, and fear that had trapped us all for too long. As I walked, words from our support group facilitator echoed in my mind. Dignity isn't found in what others think of you, but in what you know of yourself. And now, after everything, I finally knew. I was Margaret Reynolds. Not just a mother, not just a grandmother, not just a widow. A whole person, worthy of respect, capable of strength, deserving of peace. That knowledge, more than any court victory or financial restitution, was the true treasure I'd reclaimed. And that was what I would pass on to Jacob. Not bitterness over what his parents had done, but hope for what he could become. Not a legacy of fear, but one of courage. Not perfect answers, but unwavering love. It was enough. It would be enough. For both of us.